Hey all, welcome back to my channel. If you haven't been here before, my name is Jules. My pronouns are they, them if you are curious, and I am an ADHD person who makes YouTube videos about topics such as mental health, makeup, as well as music. So I have not made a YouTube video in quite some time. The reasoning for that is my chronic illness, and that I did not have enough answers about what was wrong to know what to do about it. So my quality of life over the past few months has really tanked. I believe that I haven't been working for 5 months. So if you're new here and you did not know, I was a mental health therapist at the master's level for 2 years, and I actually decided to leave that field for a lot of reasons, and I have a previous video about that. But not just the job in general, but the systems I was working in and how that impacted my mental health. Also, of course, impacted my physical health because the two are connected with each other. And I have just been a professional medical patient. I've been going to a lot of doctor's appointments, which has been really overwhelming and really draining, and I deal with a lot of chronic illness symptoms that impact my executive function. So my executive function was already impacted by being autistic and ADHD and having struggles with things like PTSD, anxiety, a dissociative disability, etc. There's just so much on the mental health side that impacted my executive function, but now I also deal with so much brain fog that it's hard to even plan and prepare enough to sit down to make a YouTube video, to think coherently enough to be able to produce verbal speech that actually makes sense and aligns with what I truly am trying to say. I think the last time I posted on here, I was at a different medical facility getting medical care, and I was actually at the facility for 11 years total, but I specifically was pursuing medical care to figure out what was wrong presently from May of 2023 last year until about December of last year. I went to multiple specialists within that time. I got diagnosed with Graves' disease, which I believed I already talked about on my channel. So my Graves' disease is doing good right now. From what I know, my thyroid has stabilized. I'm not having as many issues with my PMDD symptoms. I had to keep going specialist to specialist because I think because of the way that medical care is separated, it's really hard as a patient to know what specialist is right for you. And even for your doctor, you might end up in what they call the rule out process. So while I discuss this process, I want to talk about the privilege that it's been to even access medical care and go through rule out, because some people don't make it to that point because our medical system is just so inaccessible to people, especially marginalized groups, especially people who have physical disabilities, people who do not drive and do not have access to transportation to access medical care, people who don't have access to health insurance plans they can afford to access said medical care. And while I have the privilege of having health insurance, it's still really expensive to keep me alive, especially these days with all of my medical visits. From what I remember, I kind of had a lull in getting some medical care. I was on a wait list for physical therapy, which I was supposed to start in January of this year, and I did, which I will get into. But essentially, I had a really invalidating cardiology appointment, and the reason I was at the cardiologist is my mom likely has POTS. She's not diagnosed, but she saw a cardiologist, and they were like, yeah, here's metoprolol, which is a medication that stops tachycardia. My mom also experiences the drop in blood pressure and has had those symptoms since she was like 10 years old. There can be a genetic component with POTS and dysautonomia, but also we're learning that POTS and dysautonomia can be secondary conditions to so many things like long COVID. I had made that appointment 6 months in advance from when I was having tachycardia because I was struggling with symptoms like that when I was struggling with my thyroid being imbalanced for my Graves' disease. But unfortunately, what happened is, even though I'm on methimazole, which is an anti-thyroid medication that helps my Graves' disease, and my thyroid is stabilized, I am still having those symptoms. So finally, my medical team is looking into what might be causing that and what I can do about it. And it's taking longer than expected, which is everything in medical care. I have been so overwhelmed by my experience with medical care. I've said to my provider team, like my mental health provider team, I would rather go back to like when I was actually able to at least work and have that distraction than where I'm at in my life now, where I am too sick cognitively, physically, everything to work. So around November of last year as well, I started having pain in my lower back. And mind you, I got back pain here and there like anybody else, but this was so severe. I love sleeping on my side. I could no longer comfortably sleep on my side. I had to sleep on my back. I was in so much pain, like crying, didn't know what was wrong. I went to the doctor at the time for it, but they didn't really handle that properly. And it wasn't until January 4th of this year, I waited 4 months to see a rheumatologist, and it was actually my dad's rheumatologist. My dad has reactive arthritis from a gene called HLA-B27. Now, you can have that gene and not have arthritis. So I was tested for the genes. My dad has this condition, and turns out I have the gene. But so far, my medical team does not believe I have arthritis. I went for an MRI a few weeks ago, my SI joints. So my sacroiliac joints are where the pain in my lower back is coming from. This is a pillow I have behind myself, and I'm having a good pain day right now, so I'm not using a heating pad, which I'm working on, but I have significant difficulty with standing and sitting more than I ever have in my entire life. Like, it's always been sort of painful and uncomfortable and never felt right in my body, but now it's been taken to an extreme that's really debilitating. And if you caught the hands, yes, I'm still having pain and problems in my hands as well. So I have pain widespread through my entire body. But once I saw my rheumatologist, she said at that appointment that I either had fibromyalgia or HLA-B27 arthritis, and so we were going to do the MRI to rule everything out. Now, fibromyalgia, the way it's supposed to be diagnosed is you're not just supposed to have a doctor go, okay, you have all the symptoms, here you go. You're supposed to go through rule-out testing, a lot of blood work, a physical exam, seeing multiple specialists, and really having them all agree that it's not being caused by something else. However, fibromyalgia tends to co-occur with other conditions, so it's not to say that just because fibromyalgia is a nebulous diagnosis that it's not a valid one. However, there are a lot of circumstances where people will get a fibro diagnosis and then they'll continue through like treatment and their medical care, and years later they will find out it is something else. And again, it's because fibromyalgia can either co-occur with so much, or it can be a misdiagnosis and there could be something else going on. So I want to clarify that because this is going to be the title of my video. But I waited approximately 2 months to catch up with my rheumatologist for a follow-up visit. And after she looked over like all my blood work and urine samples and just everything I did, the SI joint MRI, she said that she's confident at the moment that I do not have arthritis, which thank goodness, that is a good thing. I kind of had to push. She wasn't going to tell me my diagnoses, but I've been going through this process for many months. As I said, I'm not working because I'm in so much pain and have so many chronic illness symptoms that interfere significantly with my activities of daily living more than they ever have. Like, you might see beautiful hair here, but my mom has to blow dry my hair. Today, I had a good spoons day and I did the front of it and then she did the rest. I have never been at a point where I needed to ask for help and like physically sit down, and still I can't raise my arms over my head for extended time periods, and I don't have a medical explanation as to why. And yes, I exercise, so don't even trust me. That's been like my whole life since dealing with chronic illness, navigating that. And we will get into that life update too. I kind of took my rheumatologist aside and said, listen, I've been going through this process for a really long time. I just want an answer so that I know what to do for treatment. I want to be in the phase of treatment. I don't want to obsess and worry about labels anymore. So she confidently said that for now, that's her language, for now she's comfortable diagnosing me with fibromyalgia. Mind you, I knew I've had the symptoms of fibromyalgia for over a year, but obviously they've gotten worse in the past few months. So my SI joint dysfunction is not due to fibromyalgia. It is a separate thing and problem. The SI joints are attached to the pelvis from what I know and help to control like the pelvis and the low back. So I also have degeneration in my right hip, which came up on some rule-out x-rays. And I was pretty disappointed about this because, to circle back to when I said that I was going to see a physical therapist in January, I was desperate to fix my back. But the difficulty is that the physical therapist was pretty general and didn't really understand how to work with autistic adults with hypersensitivity or someone If you know on my channel, I've talked about my ED before. I have a past history of compulsive exercise. So with chronic illness in mind, I have to learn how to not push myself too hard because I can deal with PEM, which stands for post-exertion malaise. It's very common in fibromyalgia where I can actually just get like bedridden from doing way too much physical activity. You can look it up if you're interested. It co-occurs with a lot of other health conditions as well. I was told that my mobility was just fine after 1 week and that I could do a lot of strength training, and that actually didn't end up working out for me. It way worsened my pain. It was way too much, too fast for my body. So I tried to advocate for a more gradual approach, but unfortunately, when you're talking to someone who is not autistic themselves and has your lived experience, they don't really understand that gradual is such an individual term and what that might look like for somebody. It still wasn't at the pacing that worked for me. And I just said, you know what, I can't do this anymore. It was making me more stressed out. Now, when you have fibromyalgia, if you have stress or triggers of any kind, forget about it. That definitely worsens my pain and symptoms. So I decided to drop out after a few meetings of physical therapy. It was way too much for me. The provider was not the right fit for me. And then through some provider groups I'm still a part of with neurodivergent providers in them, I found a coach who is neurodivergent herself and is a doctor of physical therapy and has a program for people with chronic illness. Now, I'm grateful I connected with her because she actually took a lot of time to give me very relevant information about medical problems that tend to happen for autistic and ADHD adults. And she was the one who wanted me to rule out dysautonomia symptoms because I was having them. And so I ended up contacting my primary care doctor who gave me a referral to a neurologist. So that's as far as I've gotten. I saw a neurologist this week and I follow up with him again next month. And I don't even want to spend this video talking about that experience because there's definitely been a lot there on the mental health side of what it's brought up. But yeah, I'm just going through a lot of testing, a lot of rule out, but at least I know. And to circle back about my hip, I saw the information about my hip on my x-ray, and that first physical therapist, the one that I had a few sessions with and then I dropped out, I asked her about my results and she said, oh no, everyone's bodies are different. You know, it was something like that. And she didn't take it seriously. But when I asked my rheumatologist, who's the one who ordered the x-rays, she confirmed I have degeneration in my right hip. Not only that, when I was a child, I had scoliosis for a little bit, and I had to go to a specialist at MGH in Boston for physical therapy and evaluations. And another thing about me is I know one of my legs is slightly longer than the other one because I remember they figured that out in my evaluation when I had scoliosis as a kid. Throughout this process, I've gotten very mixed answers on if I'm hypermobile or not. I'm more so leaning toward no because I fail the Baton. I do not have arthritis that could be causing me to be more tight and tense, but I am open. I am not here self-diagnosing my medical problems. I'm moving through the medical system, but that is a very grueling, stressful, and triggering process for someone like ourselves. So that is as far as I've gone with my medical care. Although I did ask my neurologist to test for dysautonomia, I would compare his personality to Dr. House, who is a fake personality. So I think he's doing rule outs in other areas like with neuropathy and MS. MS luckily does not run in my family that I know of genetically. My dad has neuropathy, but he has type 2 diabetes. So neuropathy can be a secondary condition with that. I do not have that. I've been all tested. My blood sugar, A1C, like all of that is good. I'm in a good place with those things. But I am so busy. I have had more medical appointments this month than I have ever had because I had a follow-up with my rheumatologist this month. I met a new neurologist because I switched medical facilities, which I had told my story out of order, and that's okay. I switched medical facilities I think in like mid-January. So I'm getting a new endocrinologist and I see her next week for an in-person evaluation and exam as a new person on my team. So very hard on the social anxiety and the agoraphobia, meeting all these new people. And thank goodness my parents have gone with me to a lot of these meetings because I feel terrible for people with chronic illness who don't have as much supports as I do because I don't know how they're getting by. Like having my support needs met is what has helped me survive. And of course that process isn't perfect, but I feel really grateful for all that I've had during a difficult time in my life. Yeah, it's been a really stressful process, but I wanted to come on and share that I have fibromyalgia. I know there's a big like fibromyalgia community online and people who have co-occurring conditions. So currently, of course, you see me still wearing my hand braces. I have pain in my hands and wrists. I have for many, many, many months, like over a year now. And a couple of my doctors asked me to like push on my wrists. And when I do, pain shoots up through my fingers. So I'm getting an EMG. I'm not certain if that's ruling out like neuropathy, carpal tunnel, etc. But I believe that my rheumatologist thinks it's fairly likely that I have carpal tunnel and I might have to see a hand surgeon. And she even recommended getting injections in my wrists if it's bad enough, but I don't want to go that road. I will do anything. If there's any occupational therapy, physical therapy, things I can do to help my chronic pain that are more holistic, I will do that as well. So that's another update, is that I've made a lot of changes with my provider team, both on the medical side and mental health side. I'm very grateful that I found a psychiatrist who was ADHD herself, who was able to really evaluate me for ADHD and affirm what I always knew, that I was an ADHDer. I was not autistic, but not ADHD. I was both. And to start ADHD medications, which I'm on today, and it's the only reason I'm able to think coherently enough to film this video and have quality of life. However, I really wanted to work with someone who more so specialized in working with trans and autistic adults, and I didn't think I was going to find it. That can be hard with an insurance-based med prescriber, but I did. I found a new psychiatrist. She is a trans woman, and I'm super excited and went for an intake with her last week, so it's been a very busy month, and I started a new medication. I don't know if it's going to help me with my mental health or even like some of the distress from my autistic traits, like sensory distress and a lot of hypervigilance that sure can come from trauma, but a lot of it's just because when you're autistic, you're a bottom-up processor, so you take in everything in your environment before you even take in what you're supposed to, like the conversation in front of you or the dynamic in front of you, and that is very stressful. I want to bring up that I got a comment on my YouTube video a long time ago about autism that I worked really hard on, and I was very upset. I masked in that reply where someone said to me they were sick of low support need people like myself talking about autism. I do not identify as low support need. I could definitely make a whole video on why I identify as medium support need. And in fact, I am planning to get re-evaluated and have been looking into that, but there's so much medically going on right now that I don't really want to push and go do that at the same time. So while I'm starting a new psychiatric medication, I was on Lyrica for a long time. I don't know if anyone here has ever been on that, but it has not helped my pain, and when I forget a dose, I go through withdrawal, and that's happened a couple of times because I have ADHD. And it scared me enough that I decided I just don't want to be on the medication anymore, and I already cut down my dose, and my pain is not worse. So I stand by that decision. Now, see, I could have masked and wrote an in-depth document and put things in order, but you know what? That would have been too activating for me, and I just kind of wanted to sit down and make a video. I'm going to try to leave my comments on. I know I shut all the comments off my channel because there's just been a lot going on with my OSDD and my PTSD and trauma stuff, and I know talking about medical things seems to bring up a certain audience on here, and I'm not sure why or what that's about. I would like to have conversations with other people who may have been through similar situations to me, who might relate to some of this, and I hope it was helpful for me to just talk through what is going on right now. I wish I could say I would be back for more videos, but I am beyond fatigued just from being exposed to lights. So now that I have my fibromyalgia diagnosis, I know that one of the reasons that noises and lights, because I'm wearing my noise canceling earbuds too, are really draining my energy is not just because of autism, but because fibromyalgia makes you more sensitive to noise and light. So imagine that you have trauma that does, fibro that does, and autism that does. You've got three things that all are affecting each other. And so my sensory issues are really debilitating right now, like the worst they've ever been in my whole life. And I actually downloaded an app called Visible. I do not have ME, CFS, or long COVID that I know of, but I heard that you could use the app for like other symptoms to track them and look at heart rate variability, which is really important. And I was surprised because I took a test, like a little quiz on there about my level of functioning. And while my level of functioning was fairly low, I was surprised because, like I said, due to the SI joint dysfunction, like sitting in a chair, standing, like doing activities of daily living is harder than it's ever been on like a physical pain and capacity level. But now I have this added layer with my sensory distress. And actually what that quiz showed is that my noise and light sensitivity are the most debilitating part of all my chronic illness. And that just rings true for me. Like this morning, I woke up, it was like 5:18 a.m. and my parents were snoring and the birds were chirping, and I immediately had to go grab my loops. Like I knew I was just gonna go panic, and having that nervous system response wasn't gonna be good for my health. And so I have to wear my sensory aids like so much more often than ever. I don't even know how I used to be a therapist, how I had the cognitive capacity for it, how I was on video, how I had verbal speech, because I also feel that dealing with verbal shutdowns, which I can have happen whether it's a trigger or a bad pain flare, is related to my chronic illness, but it's also like intersecting with autism. The way I describe it is there's a difference between when some of my parts just don't really feel up to talking, like it feels like it would be too overwhelming. And then there's other times where I just don't have the capacity to talk. Like it feels like I can't connect the thoughts in my brain to my body, to my vocal cords, to then produce sound that is coherent and articulate enough to make sense to somebody else. Like it just feels like I can't complete that process. And I make sure to say verbal shutdowns or that I lose speech because we don't want to say things like going nonverbal. It's really important that we honor that the non-speaking community has differing difficulties and they tend to have disabilities related to speech and communication. Of course, I have autism, so I do have a disability related to speech and verbal communication. I think that for me, instead of being on the flat affect side, which I can be if I'm like sad or dissociated or like sick or tired, I tend to be overly expressive. That was a huge piece of what fit me into the autism criteria of struggling with my inflection. And it's not a mask. I know for some autistic people, they kind of overdo this on purpose as the mask. And when they drop the mask, they're more flat. But this is us. This is us unmasked, just really talking it out and excited to watch this back. We just wanted to update you on where we are in life, which is super chronically ill, spending our whole time taking care of that. We're back in our care with our dietitian. We have since January. We see her every week. We go to therapy twice a week. We're in trauma therapy. We do internal family systems, parts work. A really cool thing is if you have a dissociative condition, maybe you know of a popular DID therapist. Her name is Joanne Twombly. Well, she lives local to me, which is really cool. And I actually emailed her maybe a couple months ago about her book because I couldn't find it at the library, and she offered to lend me a copy. So I actually got to go meet Joanne, which was really cool, and read her book, which her book is about the treatment of dissociative disabilities using IFS, but also adding coping skills, which I am all for. So another thing I did is I took the Trauma Geeks 8-week nervous system study course. That was actually my like holiday present from my mom. She paid for it for me. And there was a lot that I learned, but especially in the final week of the class, which was kind of like things you can do for your nervous system and purposes they serve and how they help and what phases of trauma treatment they fit into, which fits perfectly into a lot of what Joanne talks about as well. Because traditional internal family systems therapies is like, it can stand on its own. Parts are capable of coping, and like, they can be, but a lot of parts can be really young and frozen in a different time period. So they don't have access to coping skills the way that you might, if that makes sense. I know I could make a whole separate video on that topic as well. Lots of education things going on, taking classes. Another thing I decided to do is renew my personal training certification. There was a continuing education course for a corrective exercise specialist. I already finished it, so I'm a certified corrective exercise specialist. Corrective exercise is really helpful for neurodivergent people. It's really helpful for people with chronic pain, but it's helpful for all populations. You could just be an athlete wanting to improve your performance, or someone who, you know, works out regularly and all of a sudden you feel like you lost some strength or mobility and you need someone to take a look at it. It's a fascinating study. And if any of you are familiar with Tracy Rodriguez, she's a very popular hypermobility coach on social media, and her specialty and certification is the same as mine. So I understand a lot of what she shares online because it comes from that corrective exercise background. So unfortunately, even though there are parts of me that really want to figure out what the next steps are in my life and in my career, I am too sick. And sometimes when I feel this excited and motivated, I have a motivation that things will go back to like a normal, but I also am grieving and working to accept that my normal looks different now. Like not every day is my hair looking nice and I have a little bit of makeup on, but if you can't tell, it's more minimal than what I used to do. Because I'm chronically ill, it's really hard to do my makeup, especially because of my hands and sitting and balancing and anything with raising my arms over my head. I'm still in the process of ruling things out, and instead of going to physical therapy, I'm my own physical therapist. I have all little exercises I do every day. I would love to help other people with that someday, but I'm trying to figure out a way that works for me because I like talking to my camera, but having a one-to-one with another person is something I like sometimes. Like on the ADHD side, like, yay, we get to chat, it's stimulating, I learn, but on the autism side, I get so overstimulated. Sometimes I just like don't feel up to or capable of verbal speech, and using texting is just so much easier to articulate myself and my parts and really build a relationship with somebody. If I do ever start my own business, I would love to honor that. But again, in ADHD fashion, I'm all over the place. Do I do corrective exercise? Do I do personal training? Do I go into identity coaching like I thought I would? Do I not work with people at all? Do I just work for someone part-time? Because as a medium supporting person, realistically, I've only ever really been able, with extensive support, to work part-time. And even as a therapist, I tried working full-time for a while, and that really, really significantly burnt me out. And the only reason I was able to even sustain that, again, is because my support needs were met. I didn't have to manage my finances and cook meals and do chores. Like, I still live at home with my parents, so those things were taken care of. And the way I look at it is, my whole life, on an average, I've required partial caretaking from my family to be successful in life. And just because I went to school and excelled academically, social, emotionally, I did not. Life skills wise, I did not. And those things are where I fell behind. So a lot of my time has also been being on social media and reading about and learning about the lived experience of the higher support need community. So from medium to high, also honoring that some people identify as low to medium support need and medium to high support need, as well as profound support need. I am also working to unlearn that just because someone doesn't have the same language as you when talking about autism or neurodivergence, it doesn't mean that they are not affirming or want to grow to be affirming. And policing everyone's language is ableist in of itself and more divisive than necessary. And so I just want to hold space for like everyone in the autism community. So folks with higher support needs, folks who identify with profound autism, caretakers, autism moms who don't want to bite my head off, who want to have a conversation, you know, caregivers, support workers, like everybody involved, because that's what we need. There's been a lot of infighting in that space, and that's been extremely difficult. Things have been really hard to navigate because I want to find community, and I have in the spoonie space, I have in the provider space to an extent, but meeting other medium support need autistic people, I have found such relatability that I never had when interacting with more low support need autistic people. And I also want to say that I super validate being a low support need autistic person, self-diagnosis, not when you're like seeing one TikTok, but when you're really taking the time. Again, I specialized in that. I helped people with that. We took our time. We looked at these things together. I consulted with other clinicians. I read books. I know that process can be done respectfully and methodically in a way that works for people. There's been a lot. I've been trying to be social in ways that work for me, like virtually, online. I've been trying to keep to a routine, take care of my health, be there for Dave in our relationship. I still on Fridays sometimes, because my cousin Sam lives close to Dave, go to her house to visit her cats. She has 2 cats, but now she has 3. So that's another life update. We have a third little cat. Maybe I'll bring Ezzy on a YouTube video one day. You never know. She has quite the personality. So that's been nice and co-regulating. So yeah, geez, in the past few months, there's been a lot of updates in my life, and a lot I've been reflecting on, and a lot that I'm inviting in, and really just trying to accept that I'm chronically ill and that's impacting my functioning, while looking at my medium support need level as not related to my chronic illness. Because if I look at it related to like my chronic illness, I actually do need help with a lot of basic activities of daily living, like especially with like feeding. Like sometimes I can't cut up things by myself, or like shovel things into my mouth. And those were not things related to autism that I had struggles with. Like I didn't have like a motor planning disability or something. Those are new with chronic illness. So I hope that you can accept me as I am with my news and everything here. I'm really working so hard on having the best quality of life I can, and that's because I have the privilege to do it, and I want to acknowledge that other people don't. And I miss being a helper so much. I miss having the capacity to really listen and hold space for other people, because I know such an important piece of my channel and my career was co-regulating other people, witnessing other people, building community with other people. And that can be really hard to do when you have autism and trauma and a dissociative disability and chronic illness and all these things that interfere with like the capacity or ability to engage with people socially. But I'm putting myself out there by having a YouTube video about it. So that's all I have for you today. This is going to be long to edit. Thank you so much for watching. Give this video a like if you enjoyed it. I'd love if you subscribe to my channel as well. If you are someone who previously has been in my life and you are still watching my videos, because I don't know how to remove subscribers, I get this is awkward. I have no hard feelings against people from my past. I know they might feel differently about me, but if you hate my guts, you might be pretty happy right now that I'm suffering and I'm sick. So, you know, whatever. I'm not happy about it. But I know that in this moment, I like who I am. I'm proud of all that I've done to fight through this. And whoever wants to watch this channel is welcome to. And whoever wants to be in my life that I welcome is welcome to. And if you don't want to be in my life, that's quite all right. I'm still working on navigating relationships and everything like that to my best ability. So that is my end of speech for anyone here who's like still watching my videos and is kind of confused as to why they're bothering. All right, that's all I have for you today. Take care. All right, bye all.